Hey guys, Veronica here. So I wasn't going to shoot this week, but I realized that I wanted to show you guys what I've been working on for the last few days. I have been shooting time-lapse on it, so I wanted to get some use out of that. And just kind of talk about what's going on with the nursery space in the woods, as well as how it's evolving as I get to know it and work with it and go through the seasons here. So I started this space back in, I want to say January, and I had a bunch of potted cuttings and a couple of plants and whatnot that I had kept up near the house, and the dogs were pulling them out of their pots, so I realized that I needed a dedicated space, and the greenhouse wasn't finished yet. So I sort of set up this little corner in the forest that was close to water, that got at least 4 to 6 hours of sun per day, if not more. We're actually right at noon right now, and you can see that there's some really good shade in the middle of the day, which is exactly what I want when I'm working with younger plants. And just a spot that would get monitored, whether I'm here or my dad's here or whoever, because you walk by it on a regular basis. So that was sort of how the nursery started. It started with a couple of seed flats, of tree flats, so they're a little bit taller and deeper. And I had peach pits and various stone fruits that I had saved or that people had sent me, as well as some nuts. And so I just kind of put those, I put those in a corner in the back there. And then just a couple other cuttings and whatnot. And the fencing, people ask about the fence a lot actually. And so the fence doesn't wrap all the way around, but there is a fence that runs the length on this side, and just a wire fence that used to be used, I guess, for livestock division or something, by the former occupants of this property. And so there's a fence that runs down this side, and I decided to set these ones up behind me just as like a little barricade, because the dogs come flying through here at top speed, so it keeps them from flying through all of the pots. But what happened over the last few months now is I've obviously and clearly acquired more plants through cuttings, through seeds, just splitting up ones that I had that I want more of. And yeah, and so I realized that I needed to find a way to organize them. I'm gone about a week and a half this month, and leaving that much stuff for someone else to water when that's the bulk of what I've been doing for the last month is keeping things watered and alive is a lot to ask. So I decided that I needed to add irrigation to this space in order for that to happen and everything not to die. And in the process of wanting to add irrigation, I realized that it needed to be reorganized, and so I set to that this past weekend to reorganize the plants, figure out what various cuttings and grafted materials had not made it, and start to get an idea of what the inventory looks like. So as we move into planting season, which here is late fall, early winter, for a lot of the trees and whatnot, and even late winter and early spring, I have an idea of what I have, what didn't make it, what I want to get more of, etc. So that's all to say that this is why this space looks like this now. It was a lot of digging. I did a little bit of trenching here. Not a lot of digging, but I did some trenching just to set the pots down into ground level, or below ground level, to try and keep the roots nice and cool and keep it evenly moist. I have seen some insect activity in the pots and some of the ones that I pulled dead stuff out of, and so we'll see. Keep an eye on that as it progresses, but for now it seems like they're just helping to decompose the substrate that I've been using. So I get a lot of this, it's a compost, it's sold as compost, I'll show you. So it's sold as compost, but it's more, there's a lot of bark and wood fines in it, and so I want that to be broken down even more, and so seeing the insect activity in the pots is not concerning unless I see those plants dying. As well as I like the fact that it kind of gives everything sort of a place to congregate. The irrigation itself wasn't exactly what I wanted to put in. Initially I was thinking I wanted individual emitters, or maybe even a good different spacing drip line, like every 9 inches or so to hit every single pot. But I realized that what was happening when I was hand watering these was that the bottoms, because they're slightly buried in the ground, the base of the pot would stay moist and the top would dry out, and a lot of those feeder roots were drying out. So I decided to go to these spinners instead to water this whole space so that it would equally water the top of the soil on these pots and keep them evenly moist from top to bottom. I'm not sure this is how I'm going to propagate moving forward, but for now this is what's going to work best for me. And short of putting an emitter in every single one, and that was going to cost a lot more because I think I'm over 100 pots at this point. So the sprayers were my best solution for that. Now the problem I have with the sprayers is that they spray water everywhere, so I needed to have a function for all of that overspray, and that is where these mulch paths come in. So the mulch path is not just to keep it from being crazy muddy whenever these spray, because the soil in this area, in this particular part of the forest, is very sandy, kind of slick loam, and so when it gets wet it tends to be just like cake onto your shoes and turns into just really slippery mud. So it's not just to combat, dealing with slick mud while you're working in here while it's watering. It's also because I've decided that I'm building soil in the pathways. And so I'm starting with a bagged mix that I like. Again, it's that compost that is mulch heavy, but I don't see tons of biology in it. I see a little bit of mycelium. There's one mix I get that has mycelium in it. There's another mix, or mycorrhizal fungi. Same difference, kind of. Don't yell at me, mycologists. But there's another one that's like pretty much just bark mulch, even though they sell it as compost. And so trying to get more biology in that, I'm looking at, I found some, I don't even know if you guys will be able to see this, but I'm gonna see if I can't focus it. So I found some Stroparia mycelium in my old potato bed, even though it was mostly dried out. Some of these guys are kicking it. So I dug a lot of that out, and I've been just kind of finding little spots in the pathway to drop that in, because if I'm going to be watering this, it might as well be growing something, right? So we're growing soil, we're growing edible fungi potentially. On the strips where the drip lines are running, I am, as soon as it starts to cool off a little more, I'm going to be planting things like clover and other covers. And sort of the intention in here is to build soil horizontally instead of in a pile. I'm thinking that it might work out a little faster because we do have the life in the soil in this area as far as insects go, to help decompose these sorts of materials. There's just not very much biology in the materials that I'm able to get from the big box store. So infusing that with biology, and then once we move a lot of pots out to plant those things in various other parts of the property, being able to harvest some of that soil, bring in more raw materials, and start that cycle over again. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to kick on the water here, show you how that works. It's super simple. It's just, these spinning things right here, these spinning sprinklers. And then I'm also going to show you another little watering trick that I came up with over the last couple of days. And yeah, and that'll basically be it for this week. But let's move over and I'll plug this in and show you how that works. We'll just carry you with me because I am short on time this week. So over here is the irrigation system that I have set up. And so you'll see there's a pipe that runs the length of this fence right here and plugs into those two on the rows there. And then I have, let's see if I can do this with that tripod. I'm gonna spray myself in the face, I'm sure. That's why you watch, right? So I have these quick connects for the hose to make it a lot easier to swap out because we don't have a dedicated line for this right now. I might set this down actually. Let's see if I can balance it on the fence without it falling off. Maybe. Yes, okay. Wait. All right, so there's a quick connect on the hose, and that just, what I'm able to do, I have to kink the hose, which I know is not the right way to do this, but I don't have a disconnect on it yet. And so what I do is I just pop the hose off, whoop, like that, and then I push the quick connect onto the irrigation right here, and then that should just turn it all on. You can hear them turning on. And so then we'll go back over here and grab my little other contraption for watering. But so now you'll see that all of these spinners are spraying And so they're going to evenly water me as well as my plants. And so they'll get water all on top of the surface of these pots and help keep those feeder roots a little more wet, as well as water all of this mulch that I've now inoculated with fungi, and hopefully, you know, the forest bacteria will start moving in and we'll get some really healthy dynamic compost from these bagged composts that, while they were cost effective, they are not as dynamic as I'd like them to be. So I'm going to unhook the irrigation so that I can show you. I made a bottle filler for my wine bottle watering that I showed you guys in the episode I did 2 weeks ago, I think, and the updated 2 weeks ago. And so I'm gonna go get the hose, and then I'm gonna show you how I fill these guys. Okay, and I'm gonna leave you right here so that I don't spray everything in the process. So, yeah, so these are, I literally just took some zip ties, a little bit of the 1/2-inch main line that I use for the rest of the irrigation, as well as the connectors. So, and some of the 1/4-inch, or yeah, the 1/4-inch line that you use to usually connect other drip parts. And so, all I did was connect them like long enough pieces. They're probably about all in the like 8 to 10-inch range, maybe. I don't think any are close to a foot. But I basically just took the loose pieces of 1/4-inch I had laying around, and then cut them to fit, and cut it into 16 pieces because that's how many wine bottles I can fit in this milk crate. But so then I'll take each one of these 1/4-inch lines and I'll just push them into a bottle, just like that. Now I've been adding, I'm not going to do it today because I did it yesterday, but I've been adding things like humic acid, fish emulsion, various trace minerals and whatnot to these bottles before I fill them with water lately, just because it's so hot. And these are the bottles that go in the various food crops in the forest, so like the peppers and the strawberries and whatnot. And it's been so hot and it's been so dry that I want to make sure that I can support those plants at a biological level, as well as, you know, just watering them. It's also feeding them and providing them hopefully with a little bit more support. So we'll see how that works out. But now I've got all those lines. Let's see if you can see this better. I've got all those lines in there. And then we'll take this quick connect. And I thought it was so clever for figuring this out, because it probably takes like 5 minutes to fill all of these normally. And now I can do it in like less than 30 seconds. And I don't generally get quite as wet and quite as much splashing, but you know, every time's different. And so then I just release the water into them, and in about like 20-30 seconds all of these bottles will be full. So if you're doing lots of bottles, if you've decided that wine bottle watering is for you, and I can also do it with the Coke and beer bottles, but I'm kind of moving away from those because they do need to be refilled a lot more frequently. But if you're doing, you know, more than a dozen bottles at a time, I have like 2 or 3 dozen at this point, then there you go. This is a nice cheap way to deal with filling them. So, come on. Nope. We're gonna try it one more time. The hose is just being feisty today. There we go. So yeah, this is a nice quick way to fill all of the bottles if you're doing lots of them. And so I thought that was clever. It's less than about $10 in parts, including the quick connector. And then, you know, the fittings on either end. I have a cap on one end you can just use. I mean, you could probably like bend and zip tie it, but I had a cap laying around that I didn't use. So I have a cap on one end, I have a hose adapter on the other end along with the quick connect, just to make that process a little more efficient so you're not, you know, screwing things on and off constantly. And then from there I just move the crate around to go drop water off at the plants that need it, and that's pretty much it. So that's where this space is. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Of course, if you like what you see, always hit that subscribe, ding the bell. We're not doing a Sunday Q&A this week because I will not be in town. I'm going to a farm conference, as I mentioned in last week's Q&A, but we will be doing one the following week. So if you want to know when that's happening, hitting that bell, dinging that bell next to the subscribe, and staying in the know for all of the notifications is probably the best way to go about knowing, you know, when I decide to do things. And I'll get a schedule sorted at some point soon. But in the meantime, that's the best way to do it. So ding that bell, follow me on Instagram at FlavorKit, and until next time, happy gardening.